Santaris is an aim machine with a super snappy style and uses the Zowie FK. Flamesey's more consistent and smoother aiming style is made possible with the Zowie EC. Mouse shape is the most important thing in shaping your aim, and Zowie mice have forever been a staple for CS players, offering a variety of options. But you may be wondering, why? It doesn't look special, but that's kind of the point. With esports in the DNA of the company, reliability and function have always been their biggest priority for as long as I can remember. So what is it that makes these mice great for CS? And how do we choose a shape for better aim? Zowie reached out and provided their suite of current mice options from the DW series so that you guys could get my perspective on how to figure it all out. Oh, and by the way, if you're Zowie curious and unsure which shape you want to try, you can use their testing kit. It costs $25 and you can try out all these different shapes and sizes of the various options. You'll receive a prepaid shipping label, so when your 2-week testing period is up, you can just send it back to them. Pretty handy. We are on the full Zowie experience for this one. The monitors are a given, obviously. I've been using those for about 10 years, but we're also rocking the GSR as well to really get into that CS headspace. And I think the first shape to look at is going to be the EC3. This mouse is really fun because it is the only asymmetric or right-handed mouse that is in this lineup, and it also is a mouse that is still used in a large number today. And to be honest, I think this is such a good entry mouse, and I think this is a great mouse for a veteran as well as a novice, an entry-level mouse too, because you can get a lot of benefits just jumping to Counter-Strike, just using a palm grip if you've never actually tried to aim properly before. And you don't have to have a lot of tension at all to use this mouse because it just fits in your hand really, really well as a right-handed mouse. And so that's great because tension management is really important for flicking. So this kind of makes that a little bit easier. Also makes it easier to play longer sessions because you're in a situation where you don't have to, again, tense as much just to maintain control of the mouse. Whereas with let's say a claw grip, I'm going to be using my fingers more. I'm going to activate them to kind of keep the mouse in the position that I need them to be, which means that we're kind of activating the tendons that control our hands and our grip, and they're now going to be getting fatigued more over time, which introduces more instability and slightly different positions and so on. So generally speaking, I think this EC3 shape is a really comfortable shape. However, I wouldn't recommend people who are claw focused to want to go to this shape because you kind of lose some of the benefits of this shape by doing so. Now you can do it for sure, and you get good contact here with the knuckle part of your hand, like right here, which is important because you can get stability by doing this, whilst also still getting some of that claw grip style. So it does work, but I just don't think it is as optimal. I think there's some better mice in the lineup for this type of grip. And with the claw grip, we want the point between our fingers and the thumb as well, of course, and the sensor to be kind of as close together as possible. We don't want as much extra distance, which we kind of get because of the slope, because of the right-handedness with our pinky. So we kind of lose some control there. We want something where, okay, here's the FK. We want something where it's a bit narrower right here in the middle, so we're getting a much more uniform and just closer grip to the sensor, which is going to then allow us to feel like we get way more control out of our fingers, which is the feeling that claw grip players are generally looking for when they are trying to do a claw grip. So when it comes to the EC3, I recommend this one to people that are definitely a slow sensitivity. I think it's really nice. You can run a fast sense if you want with this. I think if you're running a lower sense though, because you're a Counter-Strike player, and that's kind of a little bit more optimal. There's less room for error with a fast sense. There's a bigger room for error when you're using a slower sensitivity and you're using, so let's say, a mouse that involves much more arm dominant and wrist dominant movements. Because when a slow sense, you're going to make a flick to a target, and if you're slightly off, it's a very easy adjustment, or maybe you're still on the target. Whereas if you have a faster sense and you're using your fingertips, there's a lot more variables and articulation that's happening, where suddenly a small error is actually you're completely off target, and that's the difference between hitting and not hitting, and then suddenly you're in trouble. So a slower sense definitely tends to be an easier way to go in Counter-Strike if you understand how to train it and use it correctly. And this mouse is ideal for slower sense. It's ideal for palm and arm-based styles, I would say. And so here we have the EC3, and I gotta say, I'm not a palm player. It's the grip that I've never used. So, and this mouse, as I said, is going to be best used in a palm fashion. So I'm trying my best to do that. And my fingers want to come in. I can feel them wanting to come in to micro adjust, which is why I'm missing those a bit. So that's a little bit weird for me. But I gotta say, it does feel really good. And also spreading out the surface area, or rather spreading out the force across more surface area using my palm grip on this mouse, it actually makes the mouse feel like pretty light. It makes the movement feel pretty light, given how sluggish it did feel to me a moment ago. But yeah, it feels pretty nice, especially considering that I don't use this style. It feels weirdly comfortable. So happy with that. So the EC3, definitely a nice choice. I'm pleasantly surprised. So the U2 is an interesting mouse because it is a symmetrical or ambidextrous shape, and it has a narrow midsection, but it actually fills out the top of your hand quite nicely. So if you're someone that's looking for a lot of stability, but you still want this like fingertip or claw-based control, the U2 is actually like a very nice option. But bear in mind, it really does make a lot of contact into the upper part of your hand, like right up here. It makes a lot of contact. So be aware of that if using this mouse. I think the extra stability like makes this mouse really, really effective for doing bigger movements, because one of the things you can do is if you're someone that has a like medium to slow sense, you can like really do really big flicks off of your forearm alone, just like pressing the mouse and into the pad. And as you're pressing the mouse into the pad, because if you're using a pad like the GSR where there's it's got a lot of control, a lot of friction, you're going to be in a great spot to be able to get really accurate arm movements and then still have like good articulation while staying kind of in neutral because of the arm movements, and have good articulation of the wrist and the fingers because of this extra stability you get by the contact that's made so easily towards the back of the mouse. So I think the U2 is actually like a really nice kind of best of both worlds between the claw or fingertip style plus that palm style stability that you get due to this hump. So that's one of the reasons why I like this shape in this series. So just as a demonstration on like some of the things we're thinking about with flicking. So I've made my sensitivity twice as slow as it normally is because I normally play on 25 cm, but this is 50 right now. And I'm on the U2, and this is one of the mice that has like that really good connection at the back of my hand. I don't get much in terms of fingertip play, but in terms of actual arm movements, it feels really, really good. And so when we're making an arm movement, we want to make like a really like snappy flick. And to do that, we want to kind of be locked in towards the back of the mouse. And then we want to have like articulation with our wrist and maybe a tiny bit of our fingers just for that little bit of micro adjustment. So we go from like target A to target B. Well, I actually have a pretty big amount of error here because I'm not used to this sense, but then you get like your micro adjustment. That was a bit more than a micro adjustment, but you kind of see what I mean. For these like maybe like these smaller distances like this, maybe I'm thinking of like, oh, can my wrist do that? If my wrist can't do it, then I'll kind of use my arm. So you kind of get the idea. We want that big flick, and then there's a micro adjustment. And when you get really good, you land really close to the target, and then you just like do a little bit of like wrist or fingertips, depending on how slow your sense is. For some people, they also might just prefer never to use their fingers at all. It is an oversight, I think, for some players, but that's like a kind of a good demonstration of what are we looking for in terms of our technique. And looking at these aim trainers is kind of a nice way to kind of break it down. Because when we actually go into game, we'll be in a situation where there's a lot more noise, so it's harder to identify what's going on in our technique. But I feel like for doing static and for like TAC FPS, it's really nice to have a mouse that gives you that good connection. Now, speaking of mice that fill out your hand, the ZA13 is extreme. The hump is really, really, really high. It is a little bit wider in feel compared to the U2, but it is a mouse that, again, it has that really big stability. So if you're someone that is actually a palm player, I think this mouse actually works like quite nicely. You can kind of do a claw style with this, but you're not going to get as much articulation out of your fingers because you just get blocked by this hump. This hump is so big at the back that you can't move it any further backwards. So your fingers aren't doing as much when we're talking about just in up and down. So you're a bit more limited with that, but you can play an aggressive claw. There are a lot of claw grippers that don't actually articulate any movements with the fingertips. And so I think if you're that kind of a player, this could feel suitable. But generally speaking, I think yeah, this mouse offers a lot of stability, not so much in terms of fingertip manipulation. So that's the thing that I would be concerned about if you are that kind of a player. Okay, so the Z13 is actually really cool because of the way it actually has this super high hump, but it allows me to get around the mouse as well. I can really get my hands around it because it's more narrow and it's very tall, which is kind of a weird combination, but it really locks in the mouse. I can get my whole hand around it and it completely fills my hand. And I'm not someone that normally is a big fan of this type of grip style, but this helps me to like really lock it in even more. I feel very controlled, especially in my wrist adjustments. The wrist adjustments actually feel like very nice and consistent. So this is a much better feel than I expected from like a practical sense. So actually impressed by this as well. And if I was a palm player, I think I would really enjoy the feel here. I mean, I enjoy the feel just for the experimentation point of view. Again, as I said, I'm like a very fingertip dominant player, but this, even though it's like an opposite style for me, actually feels really nice. And you can see obviously there's lots of errors in my aiming, but at the same time it still feels nice and it feels pretty intuitive to use, and it kind of forces your hands to do very specific things. So that makes it, I think, quite beginner friendly as well in that respect. So thumbs up from me, I think, from this as well. I think all these mice are great, obviously. They're all like good mice. They're Zowie mice after all. Like, they're all solid. It just depends on what you want. This is a great mouse for a palm player that wants that locked in feeling. The FK2, it is a very well-rounded mouse. This is a mouse that is also inspired after a pro player. The best Counter-Strike player, 1.6 player of all time, or at least that's how he's considered. I think so too. Neo, who coaches FaZe actually in CS2 right now. This mouse was designed with him, and it's way flatter. You got a lot more space on this. You can do basically every mouse style. You can actually palm this really well if you want, because it's just very comfortable. It's a bit longer. It kind of fills out your hand when you kind of like rest your hand on the mouse. And you can do a claw grip because you get a lot of like fingertip space if that's what you're looking for. You can do kind of a hybrid. You can do any grip with this mouse. It's like a great all-rounder. So I think this is a great option to consider no matter what grip style you have. If you're looking for, you know, a Zowie mouse where you can do a bit of everything, this is going to be a great choice. It doesn't really have any weaknesses. It doesn't really have any major strengths other than it's kind of a jack of all trades. I like how low it is. For me, I have a preference for that because I like to get my hand like close to the pad. You can even do a version of the kind of daunt grip here on this mouse because it is a little bit longer than some of the other ones, where you're essentially taking, as you can see, the hand much further up the mouse, and then you can kind of basically, the only contact point with the pad is going to be the mouse. So this, and then you just like go into an arm style. You use some wrist, like you can use like some little bits of fingers, but generally speaking, it's a lot more wrist and arm based. You can do that with this mouse. You can really do every single grip style with this mouse, I would say. Just depends on, obviously, your hand size to a certain extent. And also which size of the FK2 that you get, because you can get different sizes. So the FK2 is really nice because, as I mentioned, it's very versatile. You can kind of use any grip style, and it just like feels like good. The FK2 just feels like a very good mouse, honestly. And there's a reason why it's so popular. You know, it's just a foolproof situation. You can use a bit of fingertips. You can use a bit of like wrist, arm, like you can kind of use any mixture of grip, which might actually be something that's a bit more annoying for some people, because if you, like some people I feel like to keep it really simple, where the mouse kind of like forces a certain grip, and so that makes it a little bit easier for them to understand what to do. But with this, I can already like feel that there's a lot less, it's like a little bit less stability than the previous mouse I was using, the U2, because we don't have this big hump. So because of that, my hand can do a lot more, which I like that feeling, even though, you know, it can result in a bit more inconsistency. But I like that feeling, generally speaking. So yeah, FK2 is a thumbs up from me. If I was going to be leaning towards a mouse in this series, I think it most likely would be the FK2, because it plays into my preferences with like the claw grip, and I get the ability to kind of be like lower down to the pad, which I like as well. But in terms of comfort, really nice feel for this mouse. Oh, another thing too is that they're all like relatively similar in terms of the weights. So that's something to consider as well, because when you have like a really light mouse, the stopping power is going to be a little bit harder because the mouse is less light. So the mouse is not going to help you in stopping itself, if that makes sense. So having a good weight for a mouse in tactical FPS, I think is actually important. I don't think you want the lightest mouse in the world. I don't think you want the heaviest mouse in the world. Obviously, find something in between that makes the most sense. And I think these weights are in a good place for that. So lastly, the S2. The S2 is interesting because this is a mouse that just like fills out your hand a lot more. I feel like, again, because it's really big in the back, it's not quite as pronounced as the Z13 in terms of that hump, but it is a bigger hump, and it really feels like it fills out my entire hand at the back, which feels very restrictive for fingertip movements. So again, this is a mouse that I think you can claw this mouse very nicely. This is a very stable feeling claw mouse, but you're not going to get much play from your fingers. So if you're someone that needs a bit more clearance for your fingers, I don't know if this is the mouse for you, because you see this part here of the grip, like it's just like glued into the back of my hand. If I try to then add fingertip movement to it, it feels like I'm not getting the most out of the mouse. The FK2 I think is going to be a much better choice if you're someone that wants to incorporate the fingertips a lot more. But in terms of a shape that has like good stability, I think this is like a really nice shape, honestly. And I think you can do a lot with this. I think this is going to be a really good shape for people that want to also just like play a very arm dominant style, because it feels really comfortable because of how much it fills up the back here. I get a really good connection between the mouse and the rest of my forearm. So from that perspective, it really feels like maybe the best mouse I've tried out of this lineup outside of the EC3 for me, for like a very arm-based, arm-dominant aiming style. But I feel like for me, this is the mouse that has the least standout feeling to it, whereas the other shapes I feel like are trying to do something specific. But this mouse, this actually feels like one of the easiest ones to control for me, even though I'm kind of like, what are you trying to do, man? Like, what's your thing? I do feel like the S2 is really nice and well-rounded in a way like if I had to make it a comparison to it, I feel like, okay, this is kind of like the FK2, but like more for like people that want to be a bit more like palm claw, as opposed to the FK2, which I'm like, okay, you could kind of do anything, but I feel like a claw grip is kind of nice here. We get the possibility to have like a lot more fingertip articulation. So if you need some extra help on picking a shape, you can even take Zowie's quiz. They've gone so far as to use a lot of their research to try to match you up with one of their products based on your preferences. So for me, if I'm thinking Zowie, to be honest, I'm going to be thinking about playing Counter-Strike, and I generally tend to prefer the symmetrical designs. As we talked about, I'm more of a fingertip oriented player, and that is not something that works super well with the right-handed or asymmetrical designs. So now we go to our preferred grip styles. So only contacting the fingertips, that generally is where I tend to be, but let's look at some of the other options. Contacting most or all of the fingers. So this definitely suggests you've got a lot more contact probably towards the back of your hand as well, most likely. Or you're one of those fingertip players, which I feel like are more rare, where you actually don't have any contact with anything except your fingers, but you actually do get a lot of finger contact, which is kind of odd, but some people do that. The fingertip and the area below the pinky and the base of the thumb are pinching the mouse. So you've got more of a claw style. Only the fingertips and the area beneath the knuckle are in contact. Another kind of variation of a claw style. So lots of variations of claw style. And then we got the palm towards the end here. So I'm going to click the fingertips, and it's asking me what I'm using currently. So what I'm currently using is the WL Mouse Beast X Mini Pro. So it's actually a very, very small and lightweight mouse. You're looking for a bigger or smaller mouse. To be honest, I am looking to get same or smaller. So we'll do smaller and see what it matches me up with. This is about my hand size. I'm like 17.5 or 18, I think. So that's where I'm at. Shout out to Rocket Jump Ninja, who really first started to create like databases with recommendations based off of those hand sizes, and you know, everything that he's done to forward the understanding that we have of grip. So okay, so it's actually pairing me with the Zowie ST. This is actually so funny because this was actually the mouse that I felt the best with when I was playing Kovacs and CS when testing all these mice. That is pretty funny. It was also interesting because this was also the mouse that when I was playing Kovacs, you'll see that I said, oh, this feels like the least notable, which might be partly because it's maybe the least different in terms of how I'm gripping it in certain respects. So definitely an interesting thing to check out for fun. If nothing else, you might get some interesting insights. Check out the quiz that they have as well. So, you know, Zowie really going all out to try to help match you up with a mouse. So now that we're at the end of the video, I've got to give you guys what I think are my favorites of all of these choices. Now, bearing in mind I have smaller hands, they're 17.5 centimeters by 9, so definitely on the shorter end of things. But with that said, I think the first mouse that comes to mind immediately is the EC3, and it's you know coincidentally this is the most popular mouse that Zowie still has in terms of the CS playing population. This is the most used mouse by pros, and it's got the most legacy behind it too. And I believe that the Zowie's new mouse that they made is, you know, he used to also use an EC, so it's like a very similar right-handed shape too. So this is a just time-old classic, and although I'm not a palm user, if I was, I would love this mouse. And the size for me actually is really, really good. I have the small version of all of these mice, and this feels super comfortable. So if I was a Palm player, I think I would immediately be using this. Now, in terms of the other shapes that I really liked, the shape that surprised me the most was, I think, was actually a couple. So the ZA13, I immediately thought I would hate it because it's a really high hump, like very, very high, but it's actually kind of narrow. So it's a completely different feeling than I'm used to. I don't like that fully locked in feeling in my hand, but it did surprise me that it felt a lot better to use than I would have expected. And then I think another surprise to me was the S2, because the S2 is kind of like the everyman, it seems like. It's a little bit higher up than the FK, but it has a similar degree of versatility, but I think that versatility leans a bit more towards the Palm side. So it's also kind of a surprise. The FK2 is the mouse that would make the most sense for me to use, because it is the shortest mouse, I suppose, the lowest, it has the least height, and it is the most appealing for someone that is more of a fingertip dominant player. So I mean, honestly, it's not really all too surprising. If I'm really just picking two mice that I think are the favorites for me out of this lineup, it's going to be the FK and it's going to be the EC3, which are the two most legendary mice. You've got Keaton's mouse in the EC and you've got Neo's mouse in the FK. So, you know, even after all of these years, these are two just like super tried and tested shapes that really seem to deliver for pretty much everybody. So with that said, thanks for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed this this dive into the world of Zowie mice, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Stay tuned.